It's 3 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling. Your phone is face down. Your eyes are wide open. Your brain is doing that thing where it replays a conversation from 4 years ago for no reason at all. You tell yourself something is wrong with you. You assume this is a modern problem caused by screens and stress and a world that never turns off. But the real answer is far stranger. Your ancestors knew this exact hour. They had a name for it. And they weren't lying awake wondering what was broken inside them. They were doing something you've completely forgotten how to do. Let's go back. Not centuries, not decades. All the way back to before electric light existed at all. For most of human history, night didn't mean 8 uninterrupted hours of darkness and stillness. It meant something closer to 2 shifts. Historian Roger Akirch spent over a decade combing through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, and he found the same phrase appearing again and again. People wrote about their first sleep and their second sleep. 2 blocks, split by an hour or 2 of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. This wasn't insomnia. This was simply how the night was structured. What did people do during that gap? Some prayed, some had sex, some got up and tended the fire, checked on animals, or visited a neighbor. Some just lay in the dark and thought. Akirch describes this middle hour as a strangely peaceful pocket of time, almost meditative, tucked between 2 rounds of sleep. There was no shame in it. No one reached for a pill. No one panicked about tomorrow's meeting. It was simply the rhythm of the dark. Think about how different that is from the way you were taught to think about sleep. You were taught that waking up in the night means something has gone wrong. A doctor might call it a symptom. An app on your phone might flag it as a problem to solve. But for centuries, that same waking moment wasn't treated as a malfunction at all. It was simply Tuesday night. It was simply how bodies moved through darkness before anyone decided otherwise. Akirch found something else buried in those old records too. Physicians of the time didn't warn people against waking in the night. If anything, they suggested it was a decent window for quiet reflection, for prayer, even for conceiving children, since the body was rested from the first sleep and not yet exhausted by labor. Doesn't that flip the modern story on its head? An entire era of human history treated the middle of the night as useful, even sacred, rather than something to be feared or medicated away. So where did that rhythm go? The answer arrives with something so ordinary, you probably haven't thought about it in years. The light bulb. Once artificial light let people push bedtime later and later, that natural 2-part night collapsed into one. Akirch's research suggests the segmented sleep pattern faded almost entirely by the early 1900s. Within a couple of generations, something humans had done for thousands of years simply vanished. And the strange part? Nobody decided to end it. It ended quietly, the way old habits do when the world around them changes shape. But diaries only go back so far. What about humans before writing existed at all? Before clocks, before candles, before anyone kept records of anything? This is where the story gets even stranger. Neuroscientist Jerome Siegel wanted to know what sleep looked like before modern life touched it at all. So he studied 3 hunter-gatherer societies that still live largely without electricity today: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. He and his team tracked their sleep using small wrist monitors, night after night for weeks. And what they found upended almost everything people assumed about natural sleep. These communities didn't sleep in one long unbroken block. They didn't sleep for 8 hours either. On average, they slept closer to 6.5 hours a night. They stayed up well after sunset, often past 11 p.m., talking and tending fires. They didn't nap during the heat of the day nearly as often as expected. And almost none of them reported anything resembling chronic insomnia. Doesn't that sound backwards? Shouldn't people without mattresses, without blackout curtains, without noise machines be the ones lying awake? Siegel's answer was blunt. The modern idea of a fixed, rigid 8-hour sleep requirement may not be some ancient biological law at all. It may be a relatively recent invention, shaped more by clocks and workdays than by human biology itself. That reframes the whole question, doesn't it? You've been told for years that 8 hours is the gold standard, that anything less is a failure of discipline or health. But if the people living closest to how humans lived for 300,000 years aren't hitting that number either, maybe the target was never quite right to begin with. There's another detail from Siegel's research worth sitting with. Body temperature, not clocks, seemed to govern when these communities fell asleep and woke up. People tended to drift off as the temperature dropped after sunset and stir again as it climbed toward dawn. No alarm decided the moment. No schedule dictated it. The body simply responded to the world cooling and warming around it, the way it had responded for longer than any calendar has existed. Compare that to your own night, spent in a room held at a constant, unchanging temperature by a thermostat, cut off from the very signal your body may still be quietly listening for. Still, something nags at this picture. If sleep was flexible, if waking in the night was normal, why does modern insomnia feel so miserable? Why does 3 a.m. feel like panic instead of peace? Anthropologist Carol Worthman offers a piece of that answer. She has spent years studying sleep across dozens of cultures, from indigenous communities in the Andes to villages in the Trobriand Islands, and one detail keeps repeating. In most of these societies, sleep wasn't a private, isolated act. People slept near others. Family members, sometimes multiple generations, shared close sleeping quarters. Waking in the night meant waking near the sound of someone else's breathing, the low murmur of a fire, the presence of other bodies nearby. Worthman argues that this social closeness may have done something modern. Solitary sleep doesn't. It softened the fear response. Waking alone in a dark, silent house triggers something ancient in your nervous system, a low hum of vigilance that whispers you might be unprotected. Waking in a shared space, surrounded by the quiet sounds of other humans, didn't trigger that same alarm. The night wasn't empty. It was populated. Think about that the next time you wake at 3 a.m. in an empty room. Your racing thoughts might not be a personal failure at all. They might be a nervous system reacting exactly the way it evolved to react in an environment your body doesn't fully register as safe. Isolation itself might be doing more damage to your sleep than the darkness ever could. Worthman noticed something else too. In many of the communities she studied, there was no single expectation that everyone had to be asleep at the same time. Someone was often quietly awake, tending a task, watching over a child, keeping half an eye on the fire. Sleep wasn't an all-or-nothing state the whole household entered together and defended like a fortress. It was porous, overlapping, a little bit communal, even while people's eyes were closed. Nobody woke up to true silence because true silence rarely existed in the first place. So picture it. A shelter somewhere in the deep past. A fire burned low, several bodies breathing nearby. Someone stirs in the middle of the night, the way Ekirch's diarists once did, the way the Hadza and Sands still do today. They don't reach for a phone. There's no phone to reach for. They listen to the fire crack. They hear someone shift in their sleep a few feet away. Maybe they whisper something to whoever else is awake. Then, eventually, sleep pulls them back under, and the second block of night begins. Nothing about that scene resembles panic. It resembles rest, interrupted gently, then resumed. No one in that shelter is calculating how many hours remain before an alarm goes off. No one is doing math against a clock, dreading the gap between now and morning. The wakefulness itself carries no penalty. It's simply a pause, folded into a longer stretch of night, absorbed by the presence of others and the low, steady sound of a fire that never fully goes out. Compare that to your version of 3 a.m. Silence stretched too thin. A phone glowing on the nightstand. No fire, no low voices, no bodies breathing nearby. Just you and a ceiling and a clock ticking toward a number that feels like a verdict. It isn't that your ancestors slept better because they were tougher or simpler. It's that their nights were built differently, structurally and socially, in ways that modern life quietly stripped away without anyone voting on it. Here's the twist worth sitting with. You haven't inherited a sleep disorder. You've inherited a mismatch. Your body still expects some of what Ekirch, Siegel, and Worthman found in their research: a flexible rhythm, a break in the middle of the night that doesn't spiral into dread, a sense that you are not alone in the dark. Instead, you've been handed solitary rooms, unnatural light, and a cultural rule insisting that any wakefulness after midnight is proof something is broken. What would it look like to borrow something from that older rhythm? Not literally splitting your sleep into 2 shifts, most modern schedules can't bend that way. But maybe it means not panicking the moment you wake at 3 a.m. Maybe it means treating that gap the way your ancestors once did, as a quiet in-between rather than a crisis. Maybe it means noticing that the loneliness of the moment is doing more harm than the wakefulness itself. Because here's the strange comfort in all of this. The people huddled in caves and huts and grass shelters thousands of years ago weren't sleeping through the night any better than you. They were simply waking into something that felt less frightening. Not silence, not solitude, just the quiet, ordinary presence of other breathing bodies nearby, telling their nervous system, without a single word, that everything was still fine. So the next time it's 3 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling, remember this: you're not failing at something modern humans were built to master. You're stepping into a gap your ancestors knew well, standing in the same strange hour they once stood in too, just without the fire, and without the company they always kept close.